We've got another great story to share with you today, an inspiring journey into local government leadership, because that's what we do here on the Halting Winter Podcast. We tell the stories behind the titles, the unique paths into public service, and the moments that shape how these leaders show up, even when the work gets heavy. Every day, local government quietly makes modern life possible, and behind every service is a person doing work that often goes unseen. This is the Halting Winter Podcast, and I'm Seth Winterhalter. Every week, I have the pleasure of sitting down with local government leaders from across the country that remind us where government really lives, locally, doing the work that truly matters. This is the work that builds belonging. Before we hear today's conversation, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Tyler Technologies has been exclusively serving the public sector since 1998, partnering with cities and counties to make their work more manageable, more connected, and more effective. From smarter budgeting to artificial intelligence, Tyler equips local governments with software and solutions that help leaders serve with clarity, efficiency, and impact. You can explore a variety of free resources at tylertech.com/winter. That's tylertech.com/winter. And if today's conversation resonates with you, I want to invite you to check out the Municipal Leadership Development Circle. It's a global community of local government leaders who are committed to growing together, supporting one another, and leading well in the middle of municipal pressure. You can learn more about the MLDC at haltingwinter.com/MLDC. That's haltingwinter.com/MLDC. And now, let's turn to today's conversation. My guest on the podcast today is Eric Swanson, City Manager in Phoenix, Oregon, retired Colonel in the U.S. Air Force Reserves. Eric, welcome to the podcast. It is going to be a fantastic episode today.
Yeah. Hey, Seth, thanks for inviting me. I'm literally looking forward to sharing my story and encouraging others that may have similar ideas about, military and how it can work in the city management world.
Well, it harkens back to one of the first episodes here. We interviewed Peter Trodson. He's a city manager down in Albany, Oregon. And again, Coast Guard, Reserve, just amazing story. And yeah, highlighting both that transition and the skills that are kind of in both the military and in local government worlds. But your story is fascinating. You've been all over the United States serving in local gov, and you've been all over the world with, the armed services. But man, this is going to be great. I had Sabrina Dakota. She's the city manager down in Ashland, Oregon, on a few weeks ago. And she goes at the end of that, she goes, "You've got to have Eric on. Like, his story is so wild." And I said, okay, you gotta listen.
Okay.
Gotta listen to Sabrina. So
she's great. She's a linguist. She was an Army linguist. Yeah, sharp lady. She's very, very cool. Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to unpack the professional career. But before we do that, we kind of got to do what we do here on the Halting Winter Podcast. Before we unpack the professional, we got to learn about you personally. Take us back to kind of the childhood. Where were you born? And kind of give us a sense of the childhood that Eric experienced.
Yeah, what can I say? I grew up in a town called Sioux City, Iowa. So the heart of the Midwest, upper Midwest, big agricultural community still is. I grew up one of six, number 5 out of 6, big Irish Catholic family. My mom, was very, very devout in her faith, and that was expected for us to go to mass every week, and went to a Catholic grade school, high school. So that shaped me a lot. I mean, I think, playing sports and being part of, it was, part of a faith-based schooling system, school system was an important part of my altar boy. I was lector. I was, also part of the student council guy, so, even in when I grew up as a grade schooler at Longfellow Public High School or public grade school, I was captain of the guards, the crossing guards. I got elected to monitor the crossing guards. You don't see that. It's kind of old school now. You see the people using that, but they're not kids, supervising kids and putting up the flag and taking down the flag every day. That was our job. And anyway, so
It's
there you
funny.
go. Boy Scouts. I mean, did a couple of high adventure, so that gave me a sense of like, hey, what's it look like outside of Iowa? What's it feel like to, be part of a group and, Philmont, Boundary Waters. Yeah. So, interesting background. Loved it. Wasn't a perfect family by any stretch, but we still love each other, and we're a tight family.
I love that you mentioned it's always interesting to look back at kind of, especially as you get older and you get more experience and you kind of towards the on the other side of kind of the beginning of your career, trying to figure out what it is when you get experience, to look back to childhood and think about the things that shaped you. And it is interesting how I grew up in a church environment. We were at church every Sunday morning, kind of this country bumpkin church. I think we're the only family not related to someone in the church, like just as close to 60-person church. And yet the service that you learn, you just learn that, like, and I grew up in a little ranch. And so it was like, you're just going to serve. You're going to work, you're going to learn work ethic, you're going to learn service. And when you mentioned the crossing guard, I remember being a kid, and I never used that because I didn't walk to school. We drove in, but you always see them out there when you pull into the kind of the drop off area. And you had to be in kind of junior high, I think, before you could do that. And I was always like, one day I'll be in junior high and be I'll be able to wear the vest and be a crossing guard. It's just kind of funny how that is, right? These things we aspire to that shape us when we were young.
Yeah. No, it's just, sometimes I think back on it, kind of how random they were. One of the other jobs I had, you could work before you were 16, was detasseling corn. Maybe you know what that's all about in Iowa, but Iowa has just, especially Sioux City and Missouri River, Lewis and Clark, all that, huge cornfields. And every morning at 5:00 in the morning, all the school buses would show up at a designated spot. And I don't know how many school buses there were, but we'd all hop on the bus. They'd take us out in the fields, and we would detassel corn. And it was in the middle. It was like middle of July, which is the hottest and the humidest part. It's like, that's Iowa, man. They get the extreme cold, extreme hot, and you were sitting out there pulling tassels out of corn. It was an experience. I mean, you got to see people kind of in that environment, and if you could show up 7 days in a row, you got a bonus. It was that kind of the irrigation things were going while you're trying to, it was just, it was just look back on it and see how that really was, part of growing up in Iowa. You had that chance to work and be part of, you were in the city, but you're, pretty close to the agricultural world. So anyway.
Oh, an interesting environment to grow up in. And in your first stop outside of the home, you're going to go to the University of South Dakota. And just for the national audience, this is kind of interesting that, like you said, Sioux City, Iowa is kind of in that corner, right? You've got South Dakota, Nebraska, kind of all these states in the
you got it, yeah.
Borders, yeah,
Siouxland, right?
Yeah. And so before though, you're gonna get a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice, Law Enforcement Administration. But before that, as you're growing up, is there any awareness of local gov? Did you even have any idea what a city manager was?
Not really. I mean, I obviously, it was something that happened, that direction happened, after I, was serving in the military. I was also a deputy sheriff for a couple of years in Yankton County. So that's kind of where, that was when I kind of had that awareness of that career. But when I think back about it, I think about parks and places to recreate, and, and growing up near a place where there was a huge park, swimming pool, not tennis courts, probably not pickleball, but, a pool, you had to get up at 7 to take lessons, and freezing cold, it felt freezing cold, even though it was in the summer. Big football stadium where Morningside College used to play and all the high schools used to play, and the track. And it was within a few blocks from where I lived. And so, it was just, that's, I guess, thinking back on it, that's what was where I probably first encountered what local government provides, and really blessed with kind of all the things. That was back in the day where you get on your bike and you were gone all day, and then when my mom rang the dinner bell, you had like this sense that you could hear it from a mile away. It was like, man, I gotta get back before my family eats all my food. But yeah, we would spend all day just on our bikes, riding around. Nobody was really worried about us, having any problems. And yeah, it was just way different than our lives today, good or bad. But yeah, that was my life.
Yeah, it was a idyllic time to grow up, I think, where, you couldn't, my parents would never allow me inside. It was like, you're outside, like, go be a child, go imagine.
Yeah.
And so tell us then, as you're growing up, what were you thinking about your future? What were you thinking you were going to become? And how did the U.S. Air Force Reserves come on the radar?
Well, so my family, my grandfathers both served in World War One. My dad, he grew up during the Depression, and he's a World War II vet. And they all, so service. My uncles, service was a thing, and understanding the history and what they did. My dad was in the Army. He left. He didn't even. Him and his buddies didn't even go to graduation. They left, got on the train, went to basic training, and on their way to Japan, getting ready to attack the islands and the bomb. So he quickly became. He was part of he was in Japan trying to be part of the transition there, and kind of a troop that was that was still engaged, but obviously when the bomb was dropped, it was a whole different story. So he was more of an occupational part of the occupational troop. He didn't talk a lot about it. He just said it was a pretty scary environment, seeing these former Japanese soldiers still in their uniforms because they had nothing else to wear, and that whole experience. So that was I've looked up. I've seen my grandpa's draft cards in World War One, and it's been interesting. So that's kind of military service. Although it was only for a short period of time, I kind of obviously made a career out of it and retired. So I'm unique in my family in the sense that they all served. My brother served in the Army after Vietnam, and so it was a thing that wasn't expected, but it was definitely something that you wanted to do just to keep the family name, that service.
Yeah, ingrained in you, right? These things. So you kind of have this unique parallel life where U.S. Air Force, like I think back to Peter Johnson, like he's in the reserves. And I'm trying to remember if his story, if he was, I don't think he started serving in local gov until after he retired. And so your story, though, you're in, Air Force Reserves all the way up. You're going to retire as a colonel, so you're definitely in this world deep, and yet you're going to parallel that with this local government experience, which again is going to take you all over the United States. So where's the University of South Dakota? Are you in the Air Force Reserves when you go? Because you're going to get a BS and an MPA there. And tell us about that timeline so we get a scope of when.
Yeah. So it was. I was there, and had an interest in criminal justice, law enforcement. Like I said, deputy for a couple of years. While I was in school, finishing my master's degree. So yeah, I mean, it was probably 40 miles from the first unit that I belonged to, which is the 185th Air National Guard, Iowa Air National Guard. I was actually a firefighter. I was a trained crash rescue firefighter. And if you kind of go back to the late 80s, you'll probably understand that was the place where the United Airlines crash occurred. And if you recall, like in the late 80s, and there was a huge response from the community, the firefighting community, rescue community, because I think it was like 50 people died on that, redirected to Sioux City, the land, and in a cornfield, basically, is what happened. At that time, I was out of service, but yeah, it was my hometown guard unit, and eventually it would take me back. My service, my city manager position in Yankton, city manager of Yankton, South Dakota, which again was all like within an hour from where I grew up. It was coming home, and it was a decision that my wife and I made. By the way, we went to university. I met her when she was 19 years old. So that's another part of my life story is meeting her. We were both pretty young. and she was always been part of the journey. But that's where it started. That's where our journey started, was at the University of South Dakota, and going out to Maine. That was my first job. And I told her, I said, I've been throwing out resumes left and right, and I got a response from the Maine Municipal League. They want to interview me, but they don't want to pay for the cost to interview me. I said, well, I could just be going out there spending a lot of money. And she said, here, I got some money. Here you go. So she loaned me, the money to get on the ticket. And then it's a whole nother story, because when I checked in my baggage, I told the person at the baggage, I said, hey, this has got to go. This is my interview outfit. Don't lose it. It's got to go to, to Bangor, Maine, or Portland, Maine. I can't remember where we were. Well, sure enough, it went to Portland, Oregon. And so, which is kind of unique, because that's where I wound up anyway. But anyway, so the whole story was, getting a suit and everything ready, for the interview. Obviously it was a funny story coming into the interview, and they hired me. And what's unique about the Northeast is, you're probably aware, in small towns like Southwest Harbor, which is on Mount Desert Island, Bar Harbor, that area, beautiful area, Acadia National Park, is they use a town meeting form of government. So here I was, 25-year-old, basically 1 year of intern experience, but getting thrown into a town meeting environment, which, you adjust. It's like anything in leadership. You see what the mission is. You see how to get there, but sometimes the unexpected happens when you're dealing with a town meeting form of government. So anyway, that was
probably not
learned a lot of leadership. It was governing at the grassroots, because everybody that was 18 and older that was registered to vote was a member of the town meeting. We'd fill up a gymnasium and the whole thing, go through the warrant, they called it, and pass the budgets. And anyway, so I think it was definitely a good way to start a career. Sure.
Yeah, it definitely probably wasn't part of the MPA program, learning how to run a town meeting. Well, tell us about that. Let's go back, because
the closest I got to was the Newhart. You ever watch that show, the Newhart, where it takes place in New England, and they're always having a town meeting.
Well, I think
maybe I'm too old to you're younger than I, but yeah, it was this is my Larry, and this is my brother Daryl, and my other brother Daryl, that show. Anyway, that's what I saw, how town meeting works. Anyway.
Well, I think of Michael Hebert out in Massachusetts. That's how they run. Like, everyone gets a vote. Like, it's crazy. And so it reminds us that local government, in fact, Peter brought that up. Peter Johnson, he goes, it's so unique to be in the military, where standard operating procedures means a pilot in Washington can get in the cockpit with a pilot in Florida. We know exactly how to operate, because it's the same SOPs, standard operating procedures. Whereas in local government, the states vary, cities next to each other could have the totally different, operating systems. And so just because you've been a city manager for 20 years doesn't mean you're not going to find a new experience right around the corner. And I'm sure you've had a ton of that. Let's go back.
I'm finding even in my present position, there's no day like another day. I mean, that's the kind of job you have to adapt, easily to the situational awareness, and being able to be effective in your role, and making, trying to work with that type of board of selectmen, on city council or anything, or town council, those board of selectmen. And so you just had to understand who the leaders are, who, in the community, staff. It's very dynamic, but every situation different. I had my title was town manager, and then there was like 6 different other titles: road commissioner, treasurer, overseer of the poor. I don't know if you're familiar with that. What they had, kind of a local welfare kind of program, where if somebody was in need of cash because of whatever, just left their husband, or the different reasons, I would have to adjudicate application for money. So I told my parents I went from being poor, as a poor graduate student, to the overseer of the poor, is what the title was. An assistant harbor master, by the way. Yeah. So So,
All the hats. That's always the funny thing. It's like, oh, I
yeah.
finally got it. Now I'm a town manager. I finally have gotten to the top of the chair. Here's 17 other hats that you get to wear. Have fun. Let's back up.
You gotta have a lot of help. And I mean, I'm not shy about asking people for help. Like, hey, can you tell me something about this? Give me some background. Yeah. Anyway.
Let's talk about in the story, because you're going to go, you're going to serve as a deputy sheriff. You're going to serve in the city of Vermilion, South Dakota, as an assistant to the city manager. When was it? Was it in your MPA? When did all of a sudden a city manager, town manager kind of position come on your radar? And when did you think, man, I think that's what I want to do?
It's funny. Like a lot of college students do. You go to a bar and have a beer, and you start talking to people. And there was a couple of guys in the MPA program that were also assistants to, or were seeking, local government positions. And we this guy by the name of Jeff Rep and Michael Williams. It's like, hey, I'm going to be leaving here soon, so it's probably something you ought to consider. I'm like, well, what's this all about? And, I guess, again, that's where the military background probably helped me, in terms of, getting kind of like assessment of, and wouldn't this be great, because I already know what being a fireman is all about. I know what being a law enforcement person is about, which, all of a sudden, that's kind of the realm of what city managers do. They oversee those kinds of things. So I thought it was an amazing fit where I was at the time. And of course, here I am 40 years later, still just enjoying the job and just being able to move places and then have that military background. Amazing. And, I think, if you don't believe in God, you get, if you don't believe that he puts you in places, because I've got turned down for a lot of jobs because people aren't comfortable with folks that are in the military and might get deployed. That's something that's out there that's kind of I've always had a concern about that, just because I've experienced it not as a council as a whole, but individuals asking, wondering why. Okay, what does this involve? Is he really focused on being our city manager, or is he more focused on the military? And I think so you just have to. Those are the kind of things. Criticism, you have to deal with criticism, and that was one of the first things that I learned right away. Is you got to be willing to take a lot of criticism. Anyway, which in the military, that's kind of how they do it, right? You go to boot camp, they break you down, they get you, they get you on, OCS. I mean, the whole thing, that experience, I think it was suited me well, especially when I was going to school, because I was actually in the real world, really, at the same time I was in this academic. And I think that was also a benefit.
I think many people assume the AI and all of the new technology coming out, it's something reserved for large cities and urban counties with big budgets and dedicated IT teams. That is simply not true. Whether you serve in a rural township, a village, a small town, a city, or a county of any size, AI can help your organization work smarter, improve your resident service, and give your team back valuable time to focus on the work that matters most. Tyler Technologies is helping local governments of every size put practical AI solutions to work, helping make communities more efficient, more resilient, and better prepared for the future. To learn how your organization can begin using AI today in helpful ways, visit tylertech.com/winter. That's tylertech.com/winter. And if you'll be attending the GMIS Meets Conference in Virginia, be sure to stop by the Tyler Technologies booth and join the AI at Work general session held on Monday afternoon to see firsthand how local governments are putting AI to work in practical, meaningful ways. Now, back to the conversation. It is a unique reality, and I think that's why I've kind of fallen in love with specifically city managers, county administrators, this unique role that is it is the closest leadership role to people. Every day you are serving people that you reside with. These are your neighbors. These are places. It is the closest form of government. It is such a missional work. And I wonder, in a lot of what you just said, I'll ask a question because I think it'd be relevant to the audience listening of local government leaders. it must be interesting. You must have faced this numerous times where, like what you just said, you can face this kind of adversity of like people going, well, are you going to be all in? Are you just doing your thing? Which can be really hard as someone who, like, again, you're serving as a town manager wearing all these hats. Like you signed up to lead, not to necessarily be the person over the poor and, all these different things. And you're also in the military serving, like defending our freedoms, making sure that like people can live their everyday lives in comfort while, we are taking care of threats from without and within. When you're living such a service mindset, and then you face that kind of adversity, that questioning, almost your deep ethics of why you serve. Maybe even speak to that for a moment. How does someone? Because I wonder if we're losing some of our best to either getting out of public sector, or even we're discouraging young people who go, man, I think I'd love this missional work, but I don't know if I want to be under that kind of like pressure to feel like I've got to always adjudicate my service versus selfishness. Maybe speak to that. How have you wrestled with that?
For me, it's just about showing up, keep showing up, and discouragement is just a setback, but trying to move forward and try to just overcome that adversity, I think is the key thing. Just keep showing up, and showing that you're there and you want what's best for the community, and it's a privilege to serve. It's humbling, and not necessarily get reactive and try to make some kind of a point about it. I think sometimes you just got to take those and move forward. So I always call it just keep showing up. I'm here, and take the opportunity to also get involved in the different association, city managers association. And that's why I'm so, just really pleased with the progress that we've been making in Oregon to establish a group of city managers who are promoting, ex-military, military people to be in local government, whether it's city management, police, public works, just doing what we can to promote the opportunities that are there, and hopefully, getting those folks that are looking for, what I think are great jobs, service type jobs, always has great benefits and all those practical things, but also an opportunity to serve and be a part of your community in whatever aspect that you choose. But city managers is a little different. And so, the challenge there is, I think, that I've seen with others who are trying to transition, specifically in the city management world, they just, I think there's, again, you just have to overcome that sense of your leadership style of, top down and all those kind of things, and which is completely false, right? I mean, it's any leader and what they teach you, a team, it's servant leadership and being able to accomplish things through those kinds of things and giving praise to other people. So how do you get to that position? I don't know. For me, it was being able to, be willing to move, be willing to go to the place where if you limit, the areas that you want to live, which I understand that people do that because they have wives and families and things. But sometimes you just got to go where the work is and be willing to make that move, and look at a wider, area for those positions, and, try to make those contacts within the community to get an idea of what's going on, and be prepared to interview, and to tell your story. And I think, to me, I think that councils and communities are looking for people that are committed to a mission or are committed to service. And so just keep trying. I mean, I don't know how many times I've been, and again, I think it's because this is where, God put me. I didn't, and I got a lot of no's thinking, oh man, what happened? Well, it happened for a reason. And so, but just, I don't know, keep moving forward. That's all I can say.
I love it. I think it's really good. The two things that you heard, and we're going to actually get are perfect segues into your story. You have to have deep conviction. If you need a lot of affirmation from others, city management might not be for you, because especially in today's age, you have to deal with a lot of negativity. And it's not just negativity. It's people want their own thing, right? And electeds have pressure. Your elected council all have each pressures. Your residents have no idea really what local government does. So they just care about the pothole on their street and their trash pickup. And so you have to be able to go, hey, I know what I am. I know what my mission is. And I need to live out of that, not out of the praise of people. Now, I hope this podcast exists to bring a little more spotlight, a little more, thankfulness for local government and city management. But I think, you need to have a real deep internal well to do well and to last long in this. And really, like you said, too, that awareness of you got to kind of cast a big net and go, where are we going to go? And you've done that. I want to be mindful because this episode could be like 3 hours long because you have so many places. But let's hit some, because I think it's cool. I love this podcast because it hits all these kind of waypoints, and it kind of gets to highlight these unique places across the American landscape. So you mentioned Southwest Harbor, Maine, and you're going to be you go right into town management. And I think you said earlier, like, you're one of the youngest managers in Maine's history. I think this is on an island. You don't really think about islands in Maine off the coast. This is an hour south of Bangor, population 1,800. You already mentioned it's kind of that town meeting feel. What was it like to be in the seat for the first time? And so far, I mean, had you ever even been to Maine besides to interview there?
No. Actually, when I was thinking about that, about going and making the decision, even though they, wouldn't pay for my expenses, I thought to myself, well, I've never been to Maine. This would be a great opportunity, just even regardless of what happens, to see what that looks like, see what that place looks like. I mean, it's one of the higher visited places in national parks in the country, and it has its own history with the Rockefellers. It's just so amazing places to see and experience, just even on that trip for an interview. And it was again, just getting the position, checking in at the hotel. I'm looking at the newspapers that were stacked at the hotel as I'm checking in, and there's my picture right on the front page. And I think at the time, who was the Oklahoma bomber? What was that guy's name? Huh?
Timothy McVeigh.
Timothy McVeigh. He was also on the front page. So here's Eric Swanson. He's coming to town. Here's Timothy McVeigh, getting arrested. And, anyway, that's a little off the topic, but it just sort of struck me then and there, like, oh, wait, there's going to be a lot of people looking at you, and they're going to know your name, and they're going to be talking about you. And you just better get used to that because you're on the front page. I'll never forget that. And when I told my parents that, they had a big laugh out of it too. I think I sent them a picture of it, or I sent them it, and they had a big laugh. Bar Harbor Times.
The barber. Well, that's a perfect setup. Like you say, you learn the lesson that you're going to be the face. It's really, that role is so unique because it is the epicenter of kind of this, I always call it the three-headed snake of, you've got electeds, you've got the staff of the organization, you've got residents, and you're trying to figure out how do we keep communication happening? How do we keep the present realities of a local, of a city, but how do we also make sure the future realities? Because infrastructure doesn't just fix itself. You've got to always be thinking. You have to be planning. We're going to talk about that when we land where you're at now in Phoenix, just the grants and these projects of just huge scale and timelines. So you go from Southwest Harbor, Maine, and now we're going to slide down the coast to Hillsborough, North Carolina. It's about 10,000 people today. You're town manager there for a number of years, 6 years, I think, 7 years, 20 minutes west of Durham. Tell us about Hillsborough and your time there.
Hillsborough, historic Hillsborough is what it's referred to, had a huge colonial Civil War history. In fact, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence lived there. And so it was at one time the capital of North Carolina, and it was where they held the first the Bill of Rights, putting together the Bill of Rights and forming this experiment that we all now call democracy, and being able to experience that. And we had a historic district, really all about preserving the history of the community. Of course, you can't beat it from the perspective of, we were in Orange County, which is part of Chapel Hill, so we were the county seat for Orange County, which included Chapel Hill. And then, so we were, literally 6 miles from, 10 miles from Chapel Hill, and then Duke was in Durham, which is probably another 10 miles the other way. And, so if you're a sports fan and you love basketball, I was like at the epicenter of, the Tobacco Road, I think they call it, it was, and another situation where, the economy had been all about tobacco and trying to trend to something else that was more sustainable. And to see that happen, with they have a regional governance there that really, invested in it. I think it's almost like the South. It's like all of the high tech industry of the South was located in that area. I think the highest percentage of PhD level residents that live there. So it was quite an experience. I was working with the first elected Black mayor of this small town, and that had a whole history in and of itself. With previous mayor, with corruption and all sorts of things that I walked into. In fact, they had just established the town manager form of government, council form of government, and so I was the third one. The first two were like 1 year and out. So anyway, but hey, it was basketball, golf. It was everything that I loved to do. I still like to do, and I was right in the middle of all that. Yeah, it was fun.
I love it. You highlight one of these things is so interesting about city management is you can come into a place that, again, you've never lived there. You've never, you don't know what's going on. And you can come into these places with drama. And it's almost like you come into like season 3 of some dramatic, show that you're like, what's going on? What's the real, and I'm sure they're not like waving the big flag and showing you all the skeletons in the closet. You're trying to have to figure this out. And then you get there and you're like, whoa, what has really happened and what's going on? And it's the kind of the rodeo of city management.
Yeah, of course, they never tell you, with all these things are happening, obviously they're wanting to get you there and trying to solve all these issues. But yeah, I mean, the other part of it was town hall was on a plantation. It was a plantation home that was built in 1804, and so we operated out of this old plantation home, and it had everything you would expect. Back in that time, he was the first the guy that owned it. The plantation within the home was the first Supreme Court Justice in North Carolina, Supreme Court Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court. So it had everything that was part of that culture at the time, which tobacco I mentioned before, but had a little slave home, that was right off the main house. He was a lawyer, obviously, so he had his law office. But we've seen that from a guy that grew up in the Midwest, East Coast. That was quite a culture change, in terms of the history and, how it played out in that area, in that part of the country. And so.
Yeah, to go to from Midwest landlocked, to an island off the coast of Maine to now North Carolina in this rich, eye-opening history. This is wild. And then the next stop on the road back is back towards home, Yankton. You're going to become the city manager of the city of Yankton. This is where you had served as the deputy sheriff for the county. You go back kind of near home here, and you're going to serve here for almost a decade. 15,000 people. Tell us about the city of Yankton. What was it like to come back kind of home?
It was great. I mean, and again, we've been blessed to live in such nice areas. There was, it's part of the Lewis and Clark Trail. It's just the same way Sioux City was. So that's how it started. It was the first capital the Dakota Territory. When the Dakota Territory included Montana, so it also had a rich history. It was the last Custer. It was the last time he was with his wife. Was in Yankton on his way west to establish Fort Meade, which is still there and was the place where my parents met. My dad was from Sturgis. My mom was from Farmer, South Dakota, and he was a soldier coming home, and she was a Army cadet nurse serving at Fort Meade. Anyway, which started with Custer. So I mean, I see that there's kind of a theme here where there's history and things that have happened that and it was very much Wild West, almost like watching Deadwood, on HBO. I mean, it was kind of, especially where my dad lived in Sturgis, now famous for its, annual bike days, and that was going on when I was there. That was, so anyway, it was a decision that my wife and I made. Her parents are still alive in Minnesota, and at that time we had three kids at that time. Three. And I thought it was important to be able to spend time with the grandparents, especially with my parents who passed away, to have that time with their family was important. So the opportunity came up. They knew who I was, obviously, and the rest is history. We were there for about 8 years. Had 2 more children while we were there. So we were up to 5 children at that point. One has a Social Security number from Maine, 2 from North Carolina, and then another 2 from South Dakota. Yeah, Yankton. Yeah.
I love it.
I knew a lot of people there. They asked, it was maybe 20 miles from Vermillion. So from time to time, I'd get called in to teach some classes. And yeah, it was very interesting place to be, and enjoyed it. I don't know if obviously you probably know Tom Brokaw. That was his hometown. And during the time that I was there, we wound up building a trail, a big biking trail through the middle of town. So I got to know his wife better, but also got to know Tom a little bit during that whole time that we built that trail. And yeah, it's been a real asset for the community.
So cool. It's so cool. That's one of the things about, I was just talking with Milton Donahue. He's a city administrator out in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And he was just talking about that, just the unique opportunities you get to have as a city manager, and the people you meet, and just kind of the cool things that, again, you're doing a park trail that, every day anyone can use. And yet here's Tom Brokaw, like, hey, this is my hometown. Now, the next stop is going to take you out to Oregon, where you're going to be for the next, 20 years, 2 decades. You happen to come to the city of Roseburg. How did Oregon, how did the West Coast pull you out, and what was it about Roseburg?
Timber capital of the nation, and kind of a similar story with economies that are declining. And he mentioned it before, but definitely they were bearing the brunt of declining timber community. Although, it was a locally owned mill, and it was, they were able to sustain because of that. I think that made it. The Ford family owned the big mill in town, and owned a bunch of property, and they weren't as restricted, in terms of other mills and lumber companies that were shutting down left and right, and some of the federal monies that were flowing to these communities that were going through this crisis of losing, a huge number of jobs that paid well. I mean, it was hard work, but paid well. In fact, they used to talk about how back in the days, these kids would go to school until they had a chance to drop out of high school, because they tell the teacher, tomorrow I'm going to make more money than you are. It was that kind of an economy. And anyway, so yeah, I landed there. Beautiful place. Had our 6th child there, Andrew. So he's the one true, he calls himself the one true Oregonian. And because they all came from different places. But we've been here for quite some time now, and love it. And really a blessing. And it's a different part of Oregon, very different than northern, the Portland vibe, the Portland politics versus Southern Oregon is exactly you have some areas, like Ashland, maybe some pockets there, but for the most part, yeah. So it's definitely a unique from just the politics. I'm here in Phoenix now, and there's a lot of the families that are here. They're buried in the historic cemetery. They were part of the move to the Oregon Trail. They all came from the Oregon Trail, moving for where they're at, and wound up in Phoenix. So again, another kind of a historic, kind of very rich culture and community. And again, if you like hiking and being on the water, white water, this is a place to be.
I have this unique pleasure, this unique opportunity to meet with thousands of local government leaders from across the nation every year through conferences and workshops and the podcast. Just these interviews, these conversations are just so insightful. And one of the things I have learned about local government leaders is this: the best leaders are lifelong learners, not because they have all the answers. It's because they understand that leadership, that journey of leadership, is never finished. Every challenge, every difficult conversation, every budget season, every organizational change or disruption is another opportunity to grow. That's why this summer we're doing something different inside the Municipal Leadership Development Circle. We're launching a special summer series called Stories That Shape Leaders. You know that every week I take a best-selling book, usually a business book, and we break down its insights and apply them to local gov. This summer, we're taking biographies, memoirs, timeless leadership books that don't necessarily fall into those typical business, culture, strategy kind of genre. And we're going to explore the lives, the decisions, the failures, challenges, the lessons of leaders who navigated incredible adversity, who had to build trust when hope was fleeting, who inspired others not only to dream, but to take action, and who left a lasting impact. Leadership isn't shaped just through strategies and frameworks alone. It is shaped through stories that challenge assumptions, stories that expand our perspective, stories that help us become the leaders our communities need us to be. When you join the MLDC, you unlock the entire summer series, but you unlock even more. You unlock the weekly leadership content, the live mastermind sessions, the nationwide community of local government leaders, and all the MLDC resources, not just for the summer, but for the rest of 2026. If you are looking for a place to continue growing this summer while connecting with leaders who understand the unique challenges of local government, I would love to invite you to join us. Learn more at haltingwinter.com/MLDC or simply use the link in the show notes. Now, back to the conversation. I love it. Let's wind through the Oregon Trail here, the Swanson Oregon Trail, because you come into Roseburg, and that's again, population today 24,000. It's an hour south of Eugene on I-5. So for many of myself, the people who maybe they drive down to Disneyland from Seattle, you're going to go through Roseburg. I've been through Roseburg 100 of times probably. Now, I don't know if I've ever stopped. I'm trying to think if I've ever stopped there for gas or something, but Roseburg.
Me too, yeah.
And then you go to from Roseburg, and again, I just want to highlight too. It's not like you're, I've had on a couple city managers who, they kind of have these 2-year stops all along the way. You're in these places for 6, 7, 8 years, and so you're really, having some substantial impact here. Roseburg for I think 7 years. You're going to end up in Medford. Medford is north of Ashland, south of Grants Pass. So this is down southern Oregon near the border. And Medford, Oregon's 86,000 people. So this is one of the bigger cities in southern Oregon. Still again on the I-5 corridor. What was Medford like going from kind of these cities around 10 to 15,000, now 86,000 people? That sounds like a bit more of a beast.
Oh yeah, definitely. It was definitely a big step in my career. Learned a lot. Didn't end as well as I wanted it to. And to be honest, it was quite a change, and it was definitely a challenging political situation. So that the comment about it, at that time I the rank of colonel, did my tour in Iraq, and so when I arrived there, it was great. But then all of a sudden there was this criticism about what's he really focused on, what's his and because I obviously when you get to the rank of colonel, you have a lot more responsibilities. It's not just showing up one weekend a month, you're doing other things. But for the most part, staff supported me, most of the community supported me, most of the council supported me. But then it didn't end the way I would want it to be. And I think after 26, 27 years, and it's almost like there's going to be that situation where you're going to, and there's going to be a political shift and, okay, Eric, it's your time to leave, you try to do that in the best way possible. That didn't happen. But hey, whatever happened, move forward. And I was luckily, able to stay in the business. However, I did take a couple of years off. One is to go back as a contractor to Iraq and working for the Department of State, or the company I worked for had a contract with the Department of State. And so going back to 10 years later was nothing changed. Everything was war torn, and it was quite an experience, just being there and basically kind of doing the same thing that I was doing during the surge, during the war.
It's interesting, again, that you say, it took you all the way till Medford, 2012 to 2015 is when you're there, to kind of have conflict in the way most city managers, it's not about when, it's not about if you get fired, it's just when, because the city manager is kind of the scapegoat, which is always, I like to point out, because again, we've got a broad audience. We have local government leaders, we got young kids thinking about local government as a career. We also have just residents who are curious. And I just like to highlight, the city manager, yes, needs to help with direction, but it's the electeds that really, they decide that, they embody that. And the city manager is apolitical, or needs to be, should be, that's the ICMA, code of ethics. You're here to be you're supposed to be the chief operational, officer of whatever that electeds give you to then carry out through the staff. And so it's always odd to me the city manager becomes the scapegoat. Like I think about Charlie Bush. I don't know if you know Charlie up here in Cedar Liberty, Washington. He talked, he just went through, they've had kind of the political shakeup on their elected officials. And it's kind of the other side, of the political spectrum is leading now. And he thought, man, I'm toast, because people, they see you as lockstep with the mayor, which you, or with the electeds, which you should be, because you're embodying them. But that doesn't mean you necessarily believe that. It's because if you don't, how are you going to move the city forward? Right. And so all of a sudden he was like, am I nervous for my job? And the new mayor was like, hey, no, you do a great job. We get that you are, now that here's the new marching orders. And now he's rocking and rolling with that. And so I think that that's the thing people don't understand is it's your electeds. If you want change, don't fire the city manager, especially if they're competent in getting stuff done. You're just putting your city back. And so I think that's the frustrating thing. But again, if people knew the way local government really was structured, they'd have more awareness to go, oh, we're focusing on the wrong person here. It's, if we want change, you got to get the electeds who vote on the things who, set the course of what's going to happen in the city. So for Medford, you're going to go up. You're going to go into the danger zone of Portland, even the southern, you're going to be in the southern kind of south of Lake Oswego and here in Gladstone. Tell us about that a couple of years. You're going to be, this is where you're a city administrator for the first time. And usually city administrators are under a strong mayor who's really the CEO. And then, but who knows? Because I've been in other states where their city administrators function entirely like city managers. So tell us about Gladstone, that unique space, city, as well as your time there.
Yeah, no, it was, it was in Clackamas County. It was, kind of a first-rate community outside of Portland. It's very, very different, obviously, in a lot of aspects. I think, reflecting back on what you mentioned, the city administrator council form of government, I would have to pause if I was ever to consider accepting a position like that again. I think it causes some, I don't know. It's just kind of a split there. It's like you got a department that, well, am I working for him or am I working for them? Because it's all, everything, any decision made on personnel at that level has to have, the approval of the council. And, in some places, I'm sure it works fine. Everybody kind of understands their role, and it's very similar to having a city manager. But in this situation, I think it was different. There was also a recall that occurred when I was there, which I never had that experience before, and see officials that I'm working with during a recall situation. Also, not that long after I showed up there, the mayor at the time, and I said, "Hey, we gotta go out, have some coffee and just chat about what's going on." And next thing I know, he's like, "I don't want to do this job anymore." But he leaves, and then it was just a lot of things happening at the same time, it was definitely a challenge. But that is sometimes that's happened. You got to be. I think if I give any advice to anybody, be really careful about decisions about where you go. Even though they want you, you might want to think about how that's going to work out. And in terms of, but obviously, not ever anticipating or expecting a recall effort that was successful. Again, that's one of those situations when that happens, everybody kind of gets, everybody gets kind of thrown out up in that whole mix. So anyway, learned a lot.
You are, and again, you've been around the block a few times. So for you, again, you were in Roseburg, Oregon for 7-8 years, and now you have this Medford and Gladstone, both kind of like, what in the world? These are brand new kind of experiences and new structures, and a bit of turmoil, a bit of chaos, and that just shows like it doesn't matter how long you've been in this. City management is it's a new bull. Every situation that you got to get familiar with and figure out how to ride. What are we doing here? And sometimes it's a bad fit, and that's okay. I think that we have to be okay with you're not the savior, the Superman, the Superwoman of an organization. Come in, do what you do, be awesome, but sometimes it's just not a good fit for you, for them, for whatever, and it's okay. You know what? We're going to find another opportunity. That's what your story is. Now, you got to help us. The city of Phoenix actually hires you. You're going to be the city manager for like a hot minute here, like 6 months, 2017. Yeah. And then you end up taking a couple years off. What was it burnout? Was it fatigue? Where were you at there so we can give some light to our audience?
Reflecting back on it, I think I was just kind of in a little bit of a like, okay, is this what I signed up for? All these years later, to experience this, also having a family and knowing how that affects, their lives. And fortunately we got through it, intact. All of my kids, graduated from college and nursing school. I mean, this is all in the middle of that, of that journey for them. And, it definitely was, it was humbling and, kind of a time to like, okay, if I keep doing this and affecting my family, where would we end up? Fortunately, it worked out, but that's where I had that offer to go and work overseas and do something that I had done before, which I loved. I loved that service as a medical service corps officer. And so, and just being in a place where there's all these things going on and you continue to see that even today, the Middle East. It was definitely kind of a period of time where what's next and what's the best move right now, and try to bring some stability to my not only my career but to my family. And things turned out. I guess they all graduated from Oregon State, Portland. Yeah, I mean all those. So they did well.
I think it's important because there have been other guests on here who have had a very similar experience where they said it just got to a point where I have other things in my life. And it's kind of like the big keynote I give at city management, association conferences around the nation is balance is BS. Like this idea that you can have a perfectly balanced life when you work in a job that never shuts off, where you are the city manager, whether you're on the clock or whether you're at the gym or in the grocery store. Like there's a lot, and especially when you're in a recall or chaotic times, hard seasons, the people, especially in the smaller communities where it's not like you're in a Dallas, Texas, Austin, Texas, you can hide amongst a million people. You're in the thick of it. And that can be a weight, especially when you had a large family, you had a lot of kids, a lot of decisions, things going on. I think there's nothing wrong with stepping back, and that could have even been permanent, but it wasn't for you. Tell us about, and this is interesting. It'd be one thing for you to come back and, find a different city, right? A different state. You come back to the one you had left. How did that happen? How did you come back and be the city manager of now Phoenix, which is where you're at today?
It's one of those, it's sort of a uniqueness of my whole career path. I mean, you don't see that very often where somebody leaves, especially, relatively quickly, like you said, with a hot minute. And then be able to, convince people to hire me back. And, there was some discussion about that, obviously, from the community. And let's just say it was a 3-2 vote. So, I mean, there I was, on a 3-2 vote. Welcome back, and so it essentially was kind of almost, it was the same group I left, but maybe a few changes. And they were in this turmoil of council staff relationships was not very good, and so it wasn't like I was stepping into a really great situation, but again, it happened. I love what I do, and I needed that couple of years off to kind of validate, okay, this is really what I'm here for. This is where I'm meant to be. This is what I'm meant to be doing. And not that I didn't enjoy the opportunities that came, working in the VA system, helping out with some of the things, with the VA. I'm big, huge veteran advocate, obviously, but yeah, coming back to Phoenix for the second time was unique. And, so, and so, think of this. So it happened, I came back in April of 2020, and then I was interim. And then I think it was by August, they said, "Hey, I really love what you're doing. You're helping out with some of the staff council relationships. We're working better as a team. Would you, consider doing it permanently?" I said, yes. That was in August. And then September was the fire. So it was definitely, again, one of those unique situations where like a disaster like this happens, which I'm not unfamiliar with. I mean, I've been in Hillsborough, I think there was 2 tornadoes and a hurricane while I was there. I mean, flooded, so it's not anything new, but wildfire is, in a city, that is unique. That doesn't happen. And it happened to us, 2,800 structures total were lost, residential, commercial, multifamily. And the area was a relatively small area that affected Talent, Phoenix, and parts of the Jackson County, rural Jackson County area. So, so here I was, there I was. And that was, just like not even a month after I was made the permanent city manager there.
Like you've said, for such a time as this, I think it's just
Exactly.
interesting, right? The way we are, where we're put. Now, just for the national audience, Phoenix is between Medford, where you would serve previously, that large town, 86,000, and Ashland, which again, Sabrina Dakota on just a few weeks ago, just south of you. It's on that I-5 corridor. But like you said, Phoenix, again, it's 4,500 people. It's a little bit more kind of a rural environment. So when that wildfire came through, I mean, just chaos, absolute devastation. But to also back up, you come in as the interim in April of 2020. And for anyone listening to maybe archives in the year 2100, we had this thing called the pandemic, full blown March 2020. So, there's that brought on all kinds of, realities where there's virtual work, there's stay at home, there's vaccines, there's all kinds of drama that came out with that, and leadership, and everyone just seemed to be, I think the West Coast too, there was something about it. I was a pastor at the time in Olympia, and it was just like leaders couldn't make any decision without it just being lambasted by one side or the other, or probably both. And it wasn't, as what they wanted. And so leadership was really, I don't think it's really recovered. I think leadership, public leadership at the local level in all areas has been a challenge because everyone's suspicious. Everyone's finds a reason to be upset. It's a really challenging time to find positive momentum. And I want to highlight that because you have done a ton of work in Phoenix to lead the charge on grants. I think $35 million secured. And to think about, maybe two things I want you to talk about in light of leading a place like Phoenix. If it's not for grants, these massive infrastructure projects don't get done. Like, it's not like Phoenix just has $35 million sitting around wondering what to do with. Like, you have to, the state, the federal, local partner, private, public partnerships, these are necessary for some of these things. Tell us about how do you go about secure? That seems like a huge number for a place like Phoenix. And what are you guys up to with that? Help us get excited and shine the spotlight on something cool.
I think at the time we had a council that was like, go do it, Eric. We're going to support you. We're not, we might question things, but at the same time, we trust you, go do it. And at the time we had a new mayor. So I sort of had to pivot from, that's a kind of a word that I use that I think sort of talks about how do you change, or how do you respond, how do you act, or how do you do your job when there's a change in the council. It's like, okay, it's pivot. It's like this. They're going to be different. They're going to have a different communication style. All the things that came with it, and it also had it happen here a couple of years ago. Another new mayor. So I've had 3 mayors in the time I've been here, and I guess being able to pivot and understand that these it's being able to kind of give them the tools they need and the opportunity to understand, what are some of the next steps, and that trust is a huge component of it. And I think that's really what happened. I had somebody ask me, who was at our Oregon City Manager conference one day, and we just had given, I've given presentations to, with this experience. And anyway, one of the long-term city managers, I won't divulge her name, came up to me. She says, "Well, Eric, was this luck, or was it leadership? What your outstanding leadership or something?" She said sarcastically. And I looked at her and I said, "You know what? Probably a little of both. Probably a little of both." And that's really, having the people that were, we did a strategic plan that identified kind of what our priorities, kind of give us a roadmap. This is all the things, because these are long-term projects. And we had great support from our legislators. In particular, her name is Pam Mars, as a representative, who went to bat for us to secure the funding from the legislature for some of these projects, which, obviously made a huge difference. They also supported us for, increasing our personnel to deal with all the building permits and things that came, through. And then it was working with the county and Oregon Department of Transportation to do all of the cleanup that goes along with what's just, houses just be decimated. Trailer parks with over 200, trailers just being, decimated, that have environmental, issues when you start removing that kind of waste and having, a relationship with the there's all sorts of people that become responders. It's not just the city. It's the electric company to get the power back on. I mean, there's all sorts of different players. And thankfully, with my experience and kind of knowing who was in the zoo, in the Rogue Valley, I think helped me and helped the community tremendously. Who we can call. And that's what everybody says during the disaster. That's when you see the best side of people, and that's what happened here. We all pulled together. We were, you said 4,500. We were down to closer to 3,000 population at one time, and so to build back and actually have more, or close to pre-fire levels, it's been quite an effort. And I think at the end of the day, with some of the planning actions that we've been taking with UGB expansion and annexation of some pretty large areas, that we're actually going to be probably double population long term. So it was an opportunity. I saw it as an opportunity, right? And don't let any opportunity pass you by, right? And it was a tragedy, but at the same time, it was an opportunity. And I think our city took the opportunity and ran with it. I won't speculate on other cities, but I don't think they did the same. They had the level of, and that was with turnover. that city manager level, and not having that consistency in leadership, I think is a huge difference. And not only for the city manager, but for my staff, they all weathered the storm and stuck with the city, continued their employment. And that huge difference. It makes a big, be able to have that continuity of folks at City Hall.
It's the difference of really not letting tragedy, whether that's, again, a fire, whether that's the mill shutting down, all these things can be such negative, like they disrupt our comforts. And you have two choices. You can either live in the woes of the past and be a victim and just get Debbie Downer about, there's no way to get, whatever it is. Or you can go, hey, I think about when a fire comes through, after it burns, like all these new things start to sprout up, and it's new life. It's the way of life. A city manager has that unique opportunity to go, hey, let's run, let's figure out a vision, let's create a strategic plan. Now the team knows what we're rolling on. We know the priorities. Let's get after it. Now we're getting grants, you're getting these wins, right? And people want to be a part of that. I think that's one of the things.
Yeah.
To the audience of city managers listening. Do you have something in front of you that can be accomplished, that when it's accomplished feels like a sizable win that leads you further to want more wins, right? There's that That's how you get out of a culture that just doesn't want to do anything exciting and is kind of like just wants to sit in its comfort, even if it's not really comforting, is you got to motivate them. And this is the story of Luke Dyer and Van Buren and all these different places. That's why I love this podcast, just all these cool stories about you guys doing work. I want to end because I think you've mentioned it, and I think knowing a little bit about you that I do, I think this is something I think you could shine some light on. You mentioned before that one of the assumptions people make is, well, you're military, it's all top down, you're the boss, blah, 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 blah. But I think one of your specialties, and one of the reasons you are successful, is you give strategic leadership, but you really build a team. You let people take authority and ownership. And it's one of the things in light of your story. You've been in a lot of places back to the beginning, Southwest Harbor, Maine, where here's a title with 18 hats to wear. And it's one of the temptations, I think, of city managers in cities under 15,000 is they find a lot of identity in doing everything. Because it's almost this savior, look at me, how hard I'm working, look at me, I'm doing it all. But the problem with that is all decisions don't have to come to you. You have to have your hands in every pot that's being cooked in the kitchen. No Michelin star chef has his hands on every pot in the kitchen. She entrusts a team of amazing sous chefs, and they judge at the table like a Gordon Ramsay, right, to make sure that the quality is at the uppermost level. It seems like you and your success and why you've been in places for so long is because you build a team around you and empower them. And you're not just doing it alone, and you're not the plug in the pipeline. Will you speak to that? Speak to the importance of how do you do it? How do you build a team? How do you entrust a team when all of a sudden you are also the person who can kind of be the punching bag if the answers aren't right?
Right. I think bottom line, I think the staff needs to know that you got the back, and that's how we operate. We don't try to hide anything, not try to hide the ball. We don't try to, we meet on a regular basis as a group, and it's really as much information gathering and decision making as just team building, and try to make it fun, and wear crazy shirts to work because it's on 4th of July and the 250th anniversary of our country, and I think also I always look for opportunities to diversify the groups that I work with and get all different perspectives, whether it's age, race, whatever. The diversity I think is healthy for an organization because it brings different perspectives. So. And now I got my phone ringing, but anyway, that's all right. We can talk to it.
That's the line.
Yeah. So, I think that's the secret sauce. I would say probably is sort of, it's like you said, you got the back, hey, You made a decision. Hey, maybe that wasn't the best decision. Let's recalculate. Let's readjust. Let's do something differently. And when I go back to even the disaster, I think the money that was the most effective for us in our rebuild was they helped us hire additional people. Other organizations try to create a central point and a consultant to come in and try to understand all that. And people had to go to the courthouse. We wanted to be in Phoenix where people could go to their city hall, which was temporary. And we were going through all sorts of, situations as this building was built. That money and to be able to effectively serve and get us to, a positive. So I mean, again, it's all about the people, and you learn that. I learned that, and as a 19-year-old enlisted guy, I saw people good, bad. I mean, I probably learned the most from the worst leaders. Like that's not what you do, in the military, or anywhere. But those are the ones that probably taught me the most, in terms of how you handle situations, especially as a firefighter, stressful situations. They're not, these are decisions that are being made in real time. There's no time to plan. You got to be able to be responsive. And, some deputy sheriff, same thing. You're going to get different calls, and I think just giving people the tools they need to succeed. Training or whatever it is. Opportunities to progress, and that's the challenge of a small community. You don't have that opportunity like Medford to kind of work your way up through an organization where there's lots of opportunity. But I think it takes a special person to do this kind of job. It takes a special type of individual that wants to serve at this level. And so I've got a team that's that way right now, and that's made all the difference. And council the same way.
I love it. It takes a village, right? And I think that's what local government is. It takes people who will step up to be elected and serve in those positions, to be the voice of the people. It takes qualified staff who've been trained and experienced and who have really, again, the people in that community's heart, but they bring a professionalism, a desire to keep learning. That's why I love, I can tell you're a learner. You love history. You love to look and go, what can I learn? How can I continue to grow? And it takes someone who is just at the same time, I think you have a unique skill set where you're situationally aware. You've been in some environments where your awareness and able to be emotionally present and solid and stable and able to respond has probably served you well. And I think that's back to that. I can't shake the idea of the pivot. I love that you brought that up. Back to the North Carolina days of being in basketball haven there. The pivot is such a great idea in light of that means you can move one foot around wherever you want. And that can shift, right? That can change your body position. The other foot, though, is grounded. And I would just encourage any leader, are you grounded in who you are, in your skills and strengths and passions, what you bring to the table? And not just to know your strengths, but to know the other areas that you need to bring in people who are better qualified than you, right? You shouldn't be the smartest one in the room. You shouldn't be the one who's gifted in all ways. That doesn't exist. And also, I think, I do a lot of this too, where coaching and teaching on every strength has a shadow. And I think that's real self-awareness to go, your strength might be servant leadership, but the shadow of that is you will die on the altar of sacrifice and not maintain, right? Like you, personal, healthy, family, healthy dynamics. You took a season off. And I think that should be highly respected in light to reground yourself, to figure out where am I, what am I doing, what's my purpose? And then the opportunity to come back to Phoenix was there. You said yes, boom, here we are. And Phoenix is really thriving. And it's just a cool story. That's why I love these stories. They're so inspirational to not only highlight you, but to highlight the power of local government to do just some amazing things for our communities around.
Right. I like that comment about the smartest guy in the room. And the quote from somebody that said, if you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. I mean, literally, that's the way I feel. Like, I mean, I don't have that. I don't have that ego that comes with being the smartest guy in the room. And I have a passion for getting different perspectives. And as you said, learning, lifelong learner, I think is critical in anything that you choose, any is, because there's always stuff changing. It's a rapidly changing world we live in, and what was like growing up in the 60s and 70s, and having those experiences is way different than nowadays. And that's not wrong. It's just, it is what it is. But you can't be the Archie Bunker, say, I was good, kind of thing. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate what you're doing for city managers. This is a great mission for you. And I really appreciate you doing it in a high quality way and just, making it fun. Thanks. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Eric, for sharing your life, your leadership journey, your insights. We could have gone a couple more hours. We're going to have you on again to dive in more into your thoughts on leadership and team. But thank you for sharing your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, Seth. And I look forward to someday we maybe shake a hand or something, whatever. But if not, it's great too. Thanks.
The stories we share here on the Halting Winter Podcast remind us where government really lives, locally, right here in our cities, our counties, the communities that shape our everyday life. If today's conversation resonated with you, please subscribe and share the episode to help these stories reach others. I'm Seth Winterhalter. You can find me at HaltingWinter.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.